And a pleasant good afternoon in the Eastern time zone. We had somebody say that it's not morning where afternoon where they are, and I apologize for that from yesterday.
No need to apologize. I mean, there's, come on now. This is where
it was more of like
right?
It was more of like
this is the motherland, right? South Bend, right? So
that's right.
It's all good.
That's right. So it's 12:35 here, and it's a different time other places. But welcome everybody to Irish Breakdown. I'm Vince D'Addario. I'm the football analyst over there is Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com, and it is Tuesday. So we're breaking it down, everybody. We're going to talk the Notre Dame offense versus the Cincinnati defense. And this is a huge week, Brian. I think this is whatever happens on Saturday, I think shapes the entire rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, look, John A1 brings it with his super chat. I mean, he makes it very clear. Happy Tuesday, IB. Offense needs to bring its A game this week. And he's absolutely right. I mean, he's absolutely right. The reality is this is going to be arguably the best defense you play all year. I would say for me, it is. I think people could make a case for Wisconsin, as being in that conversation as well, because Wisconsin's probably a little better in the front seven than Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
I think Cincinnati's better in the secondary than Wisconsin, but it's a different type of defense. And
sure,
I actually think this defense matches up better against Notre Dame than Wisconsin does.
I agree.
Because it is a spread it out. They naturally get more athletes on the field. The things that I thought Notre Dame could take advantage of Wisconsin for, perimeter speed, athleticism, things that we actually saw play out with Kevin Austin winning battles and Avery Davis winning battles and things like that. Cincinnati's more built to play against.
I would say that I would have felt better if this matchup happened last year with the way Notre Dame ran their offense, because they could have taken advantage of, I think, the matchup of the offensive line versus Cincinnati's front seven, right? I think this team is susceptible to the run, but Notre Dame doesn't run the ball very well. So I don't know that that's really an advantage. And so, that's it. When we're talking about Wisconsin versus Cincinnati, as far as the defense is concerned, I think there's some similarities in what they want to do, but I think you're using more athletic guys in Cincinnati than you are at Wisconsin. And so that adds a whole other level.
3-3-5.
Yeah, it's a very
3-3-5,
and it's a similar. They want to bring obviously their three front, but then they want to bring some other guys, and they want to twist and they want to stunt. So it's similar to what Wisconsin was doing. I just think they're better at it, and they're more athletic at it, and which can cause Notre Dame some problems.
But here's the thing that kind of to piggyback off of what you just said, Vince. The one thing to consider, however, is that this is the third three-man front that Notre Dame has faced already this year.
That's true.
Because Toledo did a lot of three-man stuff. Wisconsin was a lot of three. So I do think that is one benefit to Notre Dame, is that they have faced a lot of these teams that want to crash and bring from all over the place. Now, they haven't handled it very well, but at least they've seen it. They'll have experience seeing it, and maybe now they'll kind of figure it out. So, Vince, let's dive into this analysis, and obviously, the new thing that we're doing now is we're kicking this off with a recruiting comparison, a quick look at the recruiting comparison, and as we're going to see most weeks, it's going to certainly be an advantage for Notre Dame, and when you look at the recruiting rankings of the Notre Dame offense against the Cincinnati defense, I mean,
it's not
some things just don't even need to be said.
It's not even. I mean, look, we all know where Cincinnati is as far as what their conference is. I mean, they're not a Power Five, so they're not going to have Power Five recruits. I mean, now there's an argument to be made that they can do more with less than most teams in the country, and I think that's a very powerful argument. But if you're just putting it on paper, then I mean, it's going to be no contest. Clearly, the advantage goes to Notre Dame.
Notre Dame has 9 guys in their starting lineup ranked higher than Cincinnati's highest ranked defensive starter.
There you go.
But again, this goes back to recruiting rankings do not determine your talent level. Ahmad Gardner, you see over there, the cornerback for Cincinnati, 1,672. Ahmad Gardner is going to be one of the best football players on the field on Saturday.
Right.
And that's going to play itself out in the NFL draft this summer as well, right? Or this spring, whenever it
is. Yeah.
Is April still? Is that still considered
April
spring?
Up to April 20th is spring.
Okay, so then technically maybe
I don't know.
I'm not sure, but it's going to be a while. Myjai Sanders is ranked 1,043. He's going to be a day 1, day 2 draft pick. Ahmad Gardner is going to be a day 1, day 2 draft pick. So there's some NFL players in this roster, and it just goes to show that identifying upside and then developing that upside is more important than focus on what is someone's recruiting ranking.
Yes, no question. This is a fun game to play. Like, I enjoy seeing this on paper. I do. It's always interesting to see what the recruiting rankings say, because everybody says Notre Dame can't recruit and blah, 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 blah. So I enjoy seeing it, but this has nothing to do with what's going to happen on Saturday.
No,
it just doesn't.
To a degree. I think to a degree, though, Vince, I will say that what the frustrating thing for me is, I don't think recruiting rankings are totally worthless. I think
Sure.
My issue with the recruiting rank has always been people spend too much time using recruiting rankings as like, okay, well, because this guy was this, he's going to be this, or he can't
Sure.
be this. But the fact is you look at Notre Dame's recruiting rankings and they have a 5-star and 8 4-stars in their starting lineup. And yet their offense stinks. I mean, it just has the last few weeks. It just has. You look at the offensive line and Jarrett Patterson, who people project as a potential first-round pick this upcoming spring, fall, summer, whatever the draft is, April, is a guy that is your 4th lowest ranked starting offensive lineman. And that holds true if you put Michael Carmody in there, as Michael Carmody was in like the 150 range. It's also true if you put Blake Fisher in there. Blake Fisher would be your highest ranked offensive lineman.
Right.
So again, recruiting rankings don't determine talent, but at the same time, either Notre Dame is just completely missing over and over and over, or the analysts consistently get Notre Dame wrong, or this is a unit that clearly isn't being developed to its talent level. And a lot of that begins up front, where most of Notre Dame's highest ranked players exist. But it also goes to show that these schools like Cincinnati have to be good at identifying talent. And I think it also is the reason I wanted to point this out is a lot of the dudes on this list over here were recruited by Marcus Freeman and his staff.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it just shows that go ahead, Vince.
I was going to say and I was going to piggyback off of what you said about how the guys at Cincinnati need to coach their guys up. Well, there's a reason Notre Dame has 2 guys that were formerly on the Cincinnati staff. And there's a reason that those 2 guys are 2 of the better coaches on Notre Dame's staff. They know how to coach guys up. They know how to take guys, mold them, and make them better. And that's what they do on a regular basis. And we've seen it week in and week out this season.
If you think about it, 3 of Notre Dame's 4 full-time assistants on defense came from Cincinnati. Where'd Mike Elston come from?
That's a good point. It's been a minute, but
it's been a while, right. But he came from Cincinnati, right?
Yeah.
So what you have to do at a place like Cincinnati is you have to be really good at identifying upside. You have to be able to look at an Ahmed Gardner who's 6'2", 160 pounds, not the most explosive athlete in the world, see his body movement, see his game, and say,
sure,
give me that kid, get him in our strength program, let me coach that kid up, and he can play. And that's exactly what Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman did with Ahmed Gardner. Same with Myjai Sanders. So to me, that's one of the things that had me excited about Marcus Freeman being hired. Is he has some of that Clark Lee recruiting ability in him, because Clark Lee was very good at identifying those under the radar guys. And he also can clearly coach. But as we've seen since Marcus Freeman got here, he's answered the only question that I had is, could he recruit elite players? And he's certainly been able to do that as well. So it's exciting to see. But this is a defense that is going to have some size. It's going to have some physicality to it. But no, it's not a defense made up of a bunch of highly ranked players. So let's transition, Vince, to the run game. This to me is going to be a very interesting part to this game.
Well, yeah. If Notre Dame can do anything up front with their offensive line, they can have success in the run game against Cincinnati. I really do feel that way. IU had some success in the run game. They were getting 4 or 5 yards a carry. I didn't look at the box score. I'm just going off of what I saw with my own eyes.
Indiana had a chance to run Cincinnati off the field early in that game, Vince.
Yes, absolutely correct.
They peed away went for it on 4th down instead of taking a field goal, threw an interception in the end zone, and still was up 14-0 at one point in time, right?
Right. Yes, they were.
It could have been 24-0 like that if they didn't make mistakes.
Right. Which you can't allow a Cincinnati team to hang around, but we'll get to that part later. But the bottom line is here with this matchup right there, that one. I feel like Notre Dame can have success because you said last week you feel like when the offensive line gets it, like when the light goes on for this group, it's going to go on. this would be a great week for that to finally happen, because I think that they can have success. We're just talking about the guys that Notre Dame's lining up on the offensive line and the guys that Cincinnati is lining up on their defensive front. Notre Dame has an advantage there, man to man. They do. It's just, is that light bulb going to go off? Are things going to click for this line? Because if they do, I think they can run the football with some effectiveness in this matchup. I really do think that.
I mean, numbers-wise, Vince, it's a pretty ugly matchup.
I mean,
Cincinnati doesn't have great numbers, to your point. They gave up 169 yards on the ground to Miami of Ohio, 152 to Indiana. That's another part of this matchup that's intriguing, is not only does Notre Dame have a defensive staff that will have spent the summer talking to the Notre Dame offensive staff about Cincinnati. That stuff usually doesn't happen the week of.
Right.
The defensive staff has their own issues to worry about. Those are conversations that will happen during the summer. And they'll put together sort of a scouting report on, what they know about the players and things like that during the summer. And then the film's going to tell you what they're doing schematically. I mean, that you don't need to have a heart-to-heart with Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens to know what Cincinnati's doing defensively, schematically. You're going to see it on film for 3 games.
For sure.
But personnel-wise is really where hey, this kid really struggles with this. Hey, this is how
right.
we had to make sure we kept him out of these situations, because when he was in these situations, we'd have some trouble or whatever. Hey, this guy's really vulnerable to this type of route, that kind of thing. But also, they played Miami of Ohio in the opener. Miami of Ohio ran for 169 yards on them. Miami of Ohio's head coach is Chuck Martin.
Right.
So that's another area where I look at and say, that's an intriguing matchup. What did Chuck see things that they thought they could do? I mean, because Miami went 9 of 28 for 109 yards passing. They could not throw the ball on Cincinnati. Yet they still managed to score a couple touchdowns, and they ran the ball, in my opinion, effectively. I'll say this, Vince. If Notre Dame runs for 169 yards,
oh my gosh,
against Cincinnati,
throw them
like Miami of Ohio did,
throw them a parade.
They're going to win by 14, 17 points.
Yes.
I mean, like that's how bad it is, but also how good this offense can be with just a mediocre performance of the offensive line. But statistically, Vince, this is a rout. This isn't even close. Notre Dame is coming off a game in which it rushed for 3 yards. And then again, I hate saying that, because it includes sacks and then the taking the knee, which I think is completely stupid.
Right.
But as we pointed out in our previous shows this weekend, your 2 stud running backs, arguably one of the best, 5 best backfields in the country, had 39 yards on 20 carries. So there's not a lot to be excited about in this regards from a statistical matchup. And we don't even need to spend a whole lot of time on it in regards to that aspect of it. It's just, is the offensive line going to play better? That's the big question. Now,
it's what it comes down to.
Right. Yeah, no, you could go ahead, Vince. I mean,
bottom line,
I don't mind you interrupting me, and I know you don't mind me interrupting you. We like to have a free-flowing conversation. Yes. I know some people don't like that, but that's what we do, right? We're here talking ball.
Yeah, absolutely. To me, if Notre Dame can execute on the offensive line, then they're going to have success. Period.
They'll win convincingly.
It is that simple. It really does come down to that. It is that simple for Notre Dame's offense. If the offensive line can execute, and I'm not even saying execute 100% of the time, okay? I'm saying if they execute 50% of the time, 60% of the time. I know that now we're getting crazy, but if they can do that, they're going to have
40 right now.
They're going to have a ton of success. They just will. And then the run game will obviously open up the pass game, et cetera. But this is an area, and I'm not going to use the word dominate, because I'm not going to say that based on what we've seen so far. I'm not going to do that.
Hold your own.
Yeah.
Get a body on a body.
If you can do that, you can have success.
Now here's the challenge let's talk scheme for a second now. Okay. Here's the challenge that Cincinnati presents, because as you watch Cincinnati on film, they're doing a lot of the same stuff they did last year. 3-man fronts. They're in a 3 linebacker alignment. Their third linebacker's Ty Van Fossen's a little bigger than the guy they had last year, right? The kid they had last year is like 5'11", 215 pounds. Ty Van Fossen's more like 6'2", 220, 225. It's actually more of a pure 3-3. Then they have a nickel in the game. So like it's a pure 3-3-5 is what they've done so far. They did it against Indiana. It's what we've seen so far this year. Last year, there was no chance in heck that Cincinnati would have lined up that way against Notre Dame. They would have done what they did against Georgia, which is go to a 4-man front and play some 4-3, right? Against this Notre Dame team, there's nothing on film that's going to make Cincinnati think that they need to put an extra defensive lineman on the field. So I think you're going to get the 3-3-5 this week.
I agree. Because if you're looking at Notre Dame, why would you not do that? I'm not worried about your run game.
You're beating them with everyone's beating them with 3-4
Yes.
guys. Why do you need to put an extra guy on the right?
Agreed.
Your danger is to the Michael Mayer going off, the backs getting out of the backfield, Avery Davis, Kevin Austin, Braden Lindsey. That's your fear.
Correct.
You're not worried about them running a football on you. So when you look at it, what they're going to do is they're going to go with their 3-man fronts. Now they'll move one of the linebackers around. Sometimes he'll walk up, looks like a 4-man front, but it's out of their 3-3-5 personnel.
Correct.
But what I've noticed they're doing, Vince, is they're doing a lot of crashing. They're going to take those linebackers and they're going to just crash them hard and get a running head start to try to slam into the Notre Dame linemen. That's problematic for me because Notre Dame's guards have been very catchy, and they've been getting blasted on these type of things. So I would like to see them early in the game come out and just when those guys come, just chop them. That's what I would like to see them. Even on runs. I don't care if it results in them, clogging up the run lane. Just because it's kind of like for linebackers getting chopped is a lot like a quarterback getting hit in the face when he drops back to pass. You get flipped on your head a couple times, and all of a sudden you're going to be a little less apt to run in there 100 miles an hour.
Oh, absolutely.
But the danger, however, is if you go to chop and a guy's helping you inside, you get a penalty for that. But I think they need to be able to blast those guys. I think the guards need to be able to pick up those hard crashing linebackers. I would not want to see the backs be the ones primarily responsible for the one blitzer on that. Because, again, they're bringing 4. The back can help if they bring a second inside linebacker. But I want to see the linemen come up and engage them and be physical with them. I think if they can do that, then I think that's where Notre Dame maybe could create a crease or two. The tackles are going to have to be good because Cincinnati's ends are really good from what I've seen so far against the run. Where they can be vulnerable is in 2 areas, and this is what's going to make this game interesting. Number 1, cutbacks, which Notre Dame hasn't been great at cutbacks, but Kyron Williams is freelancing. I think could maybe result in a big run or two this game. Same with Chris Tyree. The other area is because they're so hard charging, I think you can get outside of them with some things that maybe other teams can't get outside of them on. And here's what I mean by that. Because they're in a 5 DB look, theoretically, they have perimeter players there to chase your sweeps and your things like that. However, I think Notre Dame has pretty good blocking receivers. And I think that Notre Dame has enough speed where I think they can get outside on some things. Jack Cohn's got to be willing to pull the ball and get outside and scramble for 6 yards on a read zone. They've got to be able to hand off a jet sweep, something to kind of get Cincinnati thinking left, right, and not just downhill. Because against Indiana, Vince, they were just
yes, they were, and that's where I feel because this is a perfect segue to what I wanted to say, and I wasn't sure if I should bring it up now or the past game, but in the film that I watched, I feel like Cincinnati is very susceptible to the screen, just with the way that they work upfield and the way that they do. I mean, you're right. They were coming, and they were susceptible to the screen game. And I think if you can be creative with the screen game, I think that you can kind of outmaneuver this Cincinnati ball club. I really do think that.
Well, let's just go ahead and do that, Vince. Let's dive right into the pass game conversation. Because again, at the end of the day, we can talk about the run game all we want, but is the line going to play well or not? There's no need to get too technical on that. Is the offensive line going to play well or not? That's the question. Here's the really intriguing matchup for me because this is the good on good matchup.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always felt, Vince, a lot of times whoever wins the good on good matchup is who's going to win the game.
Sure.
A lot of times, or not so much win the game, but win this particular battle between look, Wisconsin beat Notre Dame's offense last week, but Notre Dame still won the game, right? Because Notre Dame's defense beat Wisconsin's offense even worse than what Wisconsin's offense did to Notre Dame.
Right, and you can't expect that every week, but it was beautiful to see.
So you look at this matchup right here. This is the good on good matchup. Now Notre Dame's numbers the last couple of weeks have taken a little bit of a hit because of the offensive line issues. Now, Cincinnati is not a team that gets a lot of pressure on the quarterback, but that hasn't really mattered. Teams that aren't necessarily – Wisconsin's not a team that necessarily puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and they were able to still get pressure on the quarterback. They have a great individual pass rusher in Myjai Sanders, and Notre Dame's pass offense has been very inefficient the last 2 weeks because what teams are doing is they're saying, hey, we're going to come up, we're going to be aggressive, we're going to take away your quick game, we're going to try to take away some of your your perimeter screens and your RPOs because we don't think you can protect long enough to go down the field. The danger against Cincinnati, Vince, is they don't have to alter what they do to get into that look. That's just what they do. And so you're going to see Kevin Austin against Ahmed Gardner. I mean, that's good on good. You're going to see the Notre Dame offensive tackles against Myjai Sanders. That's a concerning matchup for me. This is the matchup where Cincinnati's kind of made their living. And you watch the Indiana game, they created a lot of inefficiency for Indiana. Indiana had a lot of incompletions that kind of got them in some bad spots in that game. But Indiana also made some big plays. The problem is when you break down that game, why some of that stuff maybe doesn't transfer as well as you'd like it to is because Cincinnati, a lot of the big plays Cincinnati made in the pass game was Michael Penix getting out of the pocket and making plays on the move. But at the same time, I don't think Michael Penix is as good as Jack Cohn when it comes to throwing from the pocket if Jack Cohn is right. And ultimately, Vince, at the end of the day, if Jack Cohn plays this weekend, he's going to have to be that guy. He's going to have to be the guy he was in the first two games where he was getting the ball, making quick reads, getting the ball out quickly, going through your progressions, finding that second, third guy. I also am really curious to see, okay, if Jack Cohn can't go, can Drew Pine against a completely different type of defense than the one he faced last week from a pass defense standpoint? How is he going to handle the stuff that Cincinnati's going to throw at him?
Yeah.
Because you got to throw – look, here's the deal. Say this before you jump in because this is the point that I wanted to make about Drew Pine. The best way to beat Cincinnati is to exactly what Georgia did. And when they've gotten beaten in the past, when Central Florida, when UCF's moved the ball on them in the past, it's throwing the ball downfield. Notre Dame did that really well the first two games. Last two games, not so much. Partly because of the quarterback, partly because of drops. The downfield passing game has not been good. That has to be on point. And that's the one thing we still don't know about Drew Pine from Saturday's game is can Drew beat you throwing the ball down the field?
Right, because he didn't have to. Yeah, he didn't have to. And D-Rock actually brings up the point that I was going to make. So I'm going to throw up his comment. He says, since these DBs are very aggressive, our receivers must be physical. He's exactly right. They will come up and they will press you and they will get you off route right away. So the receivers need to be able to get off press and they can't get pushed out of bounds when they're going deep. You can't do that. And so a lot of this is going to be on the wide receiving core. Can they get off that press? Can they be physical with the defensive backs? Because you're playing into Cincinnati's hands in that you don't do well with physical DBs.
Right.
Because that's what they do. That's their thing.
Is they're going to try to throw off the timing of your pass games, and that's something that Notre Dame's receivers have struggled with these first couple games. They just have. And if they're look, here's the deal. It's as simple as this. If they're able to get free releases, they have the speed to win because Cincinnati does. Ahmad Gardner's an example. He's got good speed. He's not a burner. We saw that against Georgia last year. When Georgia gave JT Daniels time, they smoked them. I mean, they held Georgia to like 46 rushing yards, but they threw for over 400 yards, which is why Georgia won that game. That's what Notre Dame is going to have to do. And that's going to be the key to this game, Vince. That's going to be the key. So
Yep.
Now go ahead.
No, I was just going to say this matchup for me is where this game is going to be won or lost. Notre Dame can win the game if they still have a subpar run game. I mean, I feel like that's a place where they can take advantage, but if they don't, they can still win the game, right? But it's this matchup.
Right.
It's this matchup right here that if they fail at this matchup and the run game matchup, it's over. I mean, there's just you can't rely on your defense to outscore the opposition's offense all the time. I mean, I just don't see that happening. And Cincinnati's offense is better than the offense that they just faced. So they have to win one of these.
Yeah, they have to play well. And it's not even about failing. Like they can't even be average. They have to be good in the pass game. Now, here's the hope is, because we're sounding kind of doom and gloom so far. The hope is where I really like some of these matchups are taking advantage of Cincinnati's aggressiveness outside and run them off at times.
Right.
And create some levels. I mean, Georgia
some
had some
underneath.
success with that. Yeah, get their linebackers and safeties in their nickel chasing Avery Davis across the field. Move Kevin Austin around and see what they're going to do. Okay, if they're going to put Ahmed, I don't think they haven't shown this. They're not going to put if you go to a 3 receiver set and all of a sudden you line up and you've got Braden Lindsey to the backside or Michael Mayer to the backside, and you've got Kevin Austin as the number 2 player to the field, they're not going to put Ahmed Gardner over there on him. At least they haven't shown it. And if they do, great. Then now you can do some things backside. I want to see Notre Dame get creative with just how they line up in this game. I think it would be unwise to just sit there and say, hey, Kevin Austin, you of 4 career games, really, played games, we're just going to let you go mano a mano against Ahmed Gardner all game.
And I think even though
you couldn't beat Purdue's backup cornerback because his technique's not there, his experience isn't there. Can he win some battles? Yes, but to me, he is your best receiver, and you need to go back to in my opinion, to saying, hey, we need to be smart enough to say, hey, look, he's got to do battle against Ahmed Gardner, but we're also going to take advantage of his size and skill set, and we're going to move him around, put him in the slot, put him here, put them there, and try to get him in some isolations where he can match, and then make Cincinnati defend that. And so those are going to be important things. We did have a couple of super chats here, Vince, that I wanted to get to from.
Please do.
From Martin, who is our usher friend at Notre Dame. Continue from last chat. I have 2 seats in front row with recruits with your name on them. God bless and go Irish. I would love to, Martin, but Vince is going to be in the press box this week, and I have 2 tickets to the game. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to go though, because my wife is sick. And so I may have to kind of be home with her this weekend, taking care of her. Depends on how she's feeling these next couple of days. But yeah, I appreciate the super chat very much. And then Martin had another one.
His another one.
Sorry you didn't get my last chat. We got it, buddy. I just was in the middle of one of my rants and I just couldn't stop talking. So I appreciate that. And I did not miss it. He says, what about Lugg at left tackle and Baker tight end help at right tackle? Come down and wish the players and coaches good luck at pregame in my section with recruits. By the way, my super chats go up $10 after each win. Now I'm really rooting for Notre Dame to win this weekend, Martin, because I appreciate that very much.
That's awesome, Martin. Thank you.
But regarding the reason I wanted to bring up those super chats now is because I think this last one especially brings up a topic of conversation. They're not going to move Josh Lugg to left tackle, whether we think they should or not. I think there's merit to it, but they're not going to do that. Notre Dame has shown under Jeff Quinn that they're just going to kind of plug in the next guy. They're not really fans of moving people around. It's what we saw last year, at least not starters. What we saw last year when Jarrett Patterson and Zeke Rowe got hurt, they simply took a backup from another position and moved him inside, as opposed to maybe moving Robert Hainsey inside, which I still feel, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers clearly saw enough of Robert Hainsey to move him inside to center. I understand it's a different situation. Tampa Bay drafted him. They had all offseason to develop him there. I'm just making the point that they saw those skills. I saw those skills. Notre Dame saw those skills. They just were unwilling to make that move. Sometimes you have to be willing to shake things up, especially when your line's playing poorly. Like last year, I understood it because your line was playing so well. Do I really want to shake up, moving Hainsey or moving Banks or moving Kramer or whatever else? Like, let's just move one guy and then hopefully we can keep going. So for me, I think that I would have moved Lugg to left tackle. I would move Lugg to left tackle. But the reality is, Vince, they're not going to do that. And if they were going to do that, they would have already done it.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that. They're just going to hope that they get Michael Carmody back. And between him, Joe Walton, Tosh Baker, it's kind of like, let's roll the dice and see who can block this week. And the unfortunate thing is you could say, well, you could help out with them. But a lot of the times when the tackles are getting beat, they're getting beat inside. There's nothing the tight end can do about that.
Correct.
I think what they do need to do, however, is I do think they need to start being smart about sliding the protection to the left side more. That is an adjustment that look, here's the deal, Vince. One of the most frustrating things I ever see when I'm watching teams play, and this is true at this level, it's true of Division III, it's true of high school, it's true of every level of football that I watch. One of the most annoying things in the world to me are coaches who just keep struggling with the same thing and just say, hey, look, we'll eventually get it right. The fact is you keep getting beat with the same stuff over and over and over again. Corner fires, double moves on the outside, and guys just lining up out wide and slanting inside. There's clearly something wrong there. So you keep running the same protections over and over and over again, hoping that they finally figure it out. Instead of saying, hey, look, we're not figuring it out. We have pretty good backs in pass pro. So let's slide to the backside and we'll have our back step up and take, any front side pressure. And if we need to bring a tight end in, we can bring the tight end and help him out on the right side. So slide to the left side, give help to the right side, I think would be the way to go as far as one of the protection checks. You can't just run one protection the whole game.
Well, right, but I think isn't that the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over 100%. And over and expecting a different result, right? I mean, it's one of the things we hear all the time in education. So, you're absolutely right. They need to mix it up because what they're doing now is clearly not working. And again, I don't blame the players. And again, substituting the players, I don't know that that's going to necessarily do much for you. I still think, and I will say this, when Blake Fisher gets back, I'd love to see him at left, Tosh at right, and then bump Lug into guard. They're not going to do that either.
I would flip him. I still think Tosh is the best left tackle when he's right. When he's right. That's the thing, when he's right. But the point being, they're not coaching Tosh up the way they need to. He's the same guy he was in the first time he stepped on the field.
Absolutely.
And I want to kind of grab this too from Joel Easton. He says, can you clarify why they can't or won't? I never said they can't. They won't make a change like that. A different podcast in a rather whiny and petulant tone said something similar. They just can't, but refuse to say why. I don't know who that is. I don't know what you're talking about.
But I love it.
I think it's hilarious.
Sorry, I love it.
It's not that they can't. They won't. They certainly can. Why can't they?
Yeah, they can do anything they want.
Yes. I mean, and I think it would make sense. I mean, we've seen teams do this. We've seen Notre Dame do this in 2014. Nick Martin hurt his hand and the line wasn't playing well. So they flipped Steve Elmer and Christian Lombard. They had, remember that year they started, we talked about this recently. They had Elmer playing tackle that year. They had Christian Lombard at guard. They had Nick Martin at center, and they had like Connor Hanratty, and I think it was Matt Hegarty were playing guard, and the line stunk early in the year. And then they just kind of said, okay. And part of it was because they had like Lombard was hurt, Martin was hurt in the spring, so they couldn't get that lineup playing together. And so after a quarter of the season was over, Heaston said, okay, this isn't working. So he flipped Elmer and Lombard, put Elmer at right guard where he was more comfortable, put Lombard at right tackle where he started in 2012, slid Nick Martin out to guard because his hand was busted up, and they put Matt Hegarty at center. And for the rest of the year, the Notre Dame offensive line played pretty well. Now, the rest of the team didn't play real well, but the offensive line played better. You see teams do this all the time, and it's about getting your best five on the field and getting them in a position where your line can play the best together. This current Notre Dame staff is very reluctant to do that because they have this. What I was told about the Hainsey thing, for example, Hainsey, I was told, went to Notre Dame and said, "Hey, I can handle center. Let me move to center." And the thought behind it was, and I somewhat understand it to a degree. I understood it when Carell was there. Still, hey, look, Zeke's ready. We're good. But when he went down, and Kramer was down, it was like, look, Lug's your next best lineman, but Lug's not a center. And so their thought was, Luggs may not play great, but we got four other guys that can play well. It just was a lack of creativity, a lack of outside the box thinking, and a lack of guts, to be honest with you, to say, hey, look, this could end up not being good, but have the conviction of your, have the conviction of will to say, hey, we're going to do this because this is the best way to do it. We're going to not stop asking these young guys to go out there and keep getting beat snap after snap and be like, well, we're down to our third left tackle. Okay, then put freaking Josh Lugg at left tackle. Right. I mean, do something different. Don't keep whining about, well, we're trying, blah, 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 blah. And no, you're not, because you keep throwing the same dudes out there and they keep getting beat with the same exact things. And then, that's on you. Right. So put Lugg out there at left tackle if you want to. It's not about they can't, they won't. They can. They certainly can. And I don't think Josh Lugg is a natural left tackle. I don't think he'd be a great left tackle. I think he'd be better than what they have out there right now. So, Vince, that's kind of where I'm at. Now, I would not say that if they had a better line coach, to be honest with you.
Sure.
Because I think a better line coach would have Tosh Baker playing better, I should say. So, anyway, that's where I'm at with that, Vince. It's not that they
just
can't,
substituting players isn't necessarily going to fix this problem because you're going to be the same guys that are being coached by the same guy. and they're going to still have the same fundamental issues. And so just plugging guys in that we haven't seen isn't necessarily going to solve the problem.
Or moving guys around necessarily.
Right. I think that's kind of my
correct. The root problem still exists.
Right.
There's a communication problem.
Right.
There's a technique problem. There's the scheme isn't working, essentially, and they're refusing to change it. So hopefully they do this week, and I think that they should, because Cincinnati's a team that does some interesting things over and over. Sorry, I just read somebody said over and over. Cincinnati does a lot of interesting things from snap to snap, double inside crash, line twists, stuff that's given Notre Dame a lot of problems, slants with double stunts.
They use their athleticism. I mean, they do what Notre Dame does on defense, not surprisingly, because they had the same defensive coordinator. But they do the same. They use their athleticism to their advantage. I mean, and that's what they're going to continue to do. And that has caused problems for this offensive line in the first 4 games. And so you just got to spend the next 4 or 5 days praying that Notre Dame kind of gets their stuff together on the offensive line and they can slow up this defense a little bit.
Right. So we talk about the pass game. Here's some things I want to see in the pass game this week too, Vince, is I want to see Notre Dame trying to get some cheap yards. And this goes back to a point you brought up with the screen game.
Yeah.
I think that I would run they have a screen that they run. We've only seen it once this year. They ran it against Florida State. I don't think we've seen it since. And I think it would have hit either side, but I think it's a really good screen to execute against a team like Cincinnati. They're going to run a bubble screen to the back to the field, and they run a tunnel screen backside. They ran it against Florida State. They hit Chris Tyree. It's the proper read to hit Chris Tyree. Yes, they could have had Kevin Austin to the boundary, but a quarterback can't anticipate that this isn't going to happen and this will. He has to read it out. His read was there. Pre-snap read should have told him to go over here.
And screens are pre-snap reads, not in the middle of place.
Correct.
Reads, just so everybody understands
that kind of screen especially.
Right.
Now, if you're going to run a screen and with a kind of a fake behind it, that obviously you would read out. But most screens, to your point, Vince is absolutely right. You're predetermining where you're going to go pre-snap. And so I like that. I like that call. I think they could do some of that. I like they need to do some double moves against it. This is the other thing that blows my mind. There's like almost no double moves. How you are not double moving press teams is beyond me. That's like the thing they're most vulnerable to is stutters and goes and slant and goes and faking it out and nodding back inside. Things that we've seen Notre Dame do in the past is under Tommy Rees. They need to do that stuff this week against Cincinnati. Now, my hope is that Cincinnati is naturally a press team, that Notre Dame will be prepared for that. I feel as if in the last couple of weeks, Notre Dame didn't see Wisconsin playing a lot of press. They didn't see Purdue playing a lot of press. So they're like, well, they're not going to press us. Yeah, they are, because they watched the first 2 games, and they were unprepared for that aggressive coverage. They're not going to be unprepared for that against Cincinnati because that's what Cincinnati does. So they need to have some post-snap switch concepts, in my opinion, are great with motion. So like you have, Kevin Austin inside and Braden Lindsey outside. You bring them in on a motion, you stack them, and then you switch them at the snap. And that allows them to get free, right? It allows them to get a step.
Correct.
It allows them to get Cincinnati's DBs in chase mode. If you can get them in chase mode, that's where you can have some success. But that takes pre-snap creativity and post-snap creativity. And not creativity in like a fake, but just, hey, look, we're going to run this concept. We're going to do a little bit of a different wrinkle this week to that in order to get our guys free. So I think those are things that we need to see this week, Vince, on top of screens, jets, reverses, things like that. Because the reality is if you run a reverse against Cincinnati, there's a chance they sniff it out and tackle you for 8-yard loss.
Sure.
But there's also a chance that happens every single time you drop back to pass. I mean, right?
Well, we talked about having to get horizontal against Wisconsin because their linebackers aren't great in space. Yeah. Well, that's not really the case against Cincinnati. Their linebackers are pretty good in space. So,
but do
you need to do that? Yes, I still think you need to do that.
Correct, because they're a man team.
Right.
Man teams can be vulnerable to say, "Hey, we're going to run off." That cornerback has no idea that you're running reverse.
Exactly,
and so
exactly, and that's where you can take the aggressiveness of Cincinnati and use that against
exactly.
That's the key here.
And then you have to have stuff off of that. Okay, we're gonna do this reverse. We think we can get them out of this look, we can get them in a reduced look and we can get them chasing and we're going to bring a reverse around, that kind of thing. There needs to be some of that using what they do against them. That's
Right.
what good play callers do. And
Sure.
then using your personnel effectively, using Chris Tyree effectively, using Braden Lindsey more effectively. Look, we talked about this the other day. Braden Lindsey scored 4 touchdowns in 2019. He scored on a screen, a post route, a jet sweep, and a reverse. 4 completely different ways. He's run out cuts, goes, and posts this year. That's it.
Right.
That's it.
Nothing around the line of scrimmage.
Nothing, no crossings, no reverses, no jets. He's just been kind of a smoke guy that goes in motion. They don't actually do anything with him. So to me, those are the things that we need to see from this pass offense this week from Notre Dame. Is you have to be able to move your guys around to get in matchups, because if they can get in matchups against the safeties and the nickels, if they can get Braden Lindsey matched up against the safeties and the nickels, if they can get the linebackers, Michael Mayer matched up against the safeties, the nickels, and the linebackers, if they can get the running backs, I think this should be a huge running back pass game week, Vince. A huge running. By the way, Vince they're having a little bit of a drill at the school, so Vince will be back here very shortly. This is a big week where they can take advantage of using Michael Mayer. They can take advantage of the running backs. They can take advantage of a lot of different parts of this football team. So those are some things where I think Notre Dame can and should have some success when it comes to the pass game against Cincinnati. And it's not a thing where, look, Notre Dame's not going to go out and complete 75% of their passes, I don't think. I'm not anticipating that. They're not a super efficient pass game right now. Cincinnati creates a lot of pass game inefficiency. It's more about you've got to be able to find some ways to create big plays. And if you can get 5 or 6 big chunk plays, that's where Notre Dame is going to be able to have a level of success in this game. And that's where this matchup needs to be. So we're going to get into the scoring offense now. And this is another interesting one because Notre Dame's scoring offense right now is not as good as its numbers show. Notre Dame obviously ranks 38th in scoring at 35.3 yards per game or points per game. That's obviously up from last year when Notre Dame was 33.4. But again, you're coming off a game in which you scored 21 points without your offense. And, obviously Notre Dame in the last 2 games has scored in the 20-point range against 2 Big Ten teams. Because obviously they had 27 points against Toledo, against Purdue, and then they scored really only, 20 points defensively or offensively. So Notre Dame's numbers are a little bit misleading. If you actually look at what last week's is, Notre Dame right now is only averaging 30 points a game of just pure offense, which would rank them right now. 30 points a game would rank them. Let me pull it up here. Scoring offense would rank the offense 64th, would tie them with Charlotte, would put them behind Central Michigan. So, so that's to me the 91 and 96 is more indicative of where the Notre Dame offense has been right now. It's an offense that's not scoring at a high level. They've had to rely on big plays to score, as you see there from their red zone offense. They've only made 9 trips into the red zone this season in 4 games. That's not a lot. A part of that is a positive in the fact that they have ripped off some big plays. They've had big plays in they've had big scoring plays in each of their 3 games. You had a 30+ yard touchdown against Florida State. You had a 55-yard touchdown and a 43-yard touchdown against Toledo. You had a 43-yard touchdown and a 51-yard touchdown against Purdue. And then obviously this past week, you had a 36-yard touchdown from Kevin Austin. That meant you're not getting into the red zone because you're scoring from further out. So that's part of it. They have been a big play offense this year, but the other part of it is they're a real inefficient team. Go look at the third down offense. The third down offense fits in perfectly with your red zone touchdown offense, which fits in with your yards per play, which fits in your yards per game. At the end of the day, a lot of that boils down to lack of first down success. Notre Dame has not been good on first down. They're getting in a lot of third and longs the last couple weeks. And the red zone started off well, and it has not been as good in the last couple games as they've played against Power 5 teams. Cincinnati, on the other hand, to me also is a little bit misleading because when you look at Cincinnati, they've played Miami of Ohio, Murray State, and Indiana. Not exactly defensive juggernauts. They did not get to 400 yards of offense against Murray State. They did not get to 350 yards against Indiana. They averaged 3.5 or 4.6 yards per play against Indiana. And Indiana's a tough, gritty team, but Cincinnati's 4.6 yards per play was the second lowest number that Cincinnati's given up all year. And Indiana gave up 7.2 yards per play to Western Kentucky. They gave up 4.7 yards per play to an Iowa offense that has stunk so far this year. So to me, this Cincinnati defense is good. Their offense is not a real dynamic group, as I just talked about. And then you look at their defense, and I think you can make a similar case about Cincinnati's defense, and this is why I kind of point out, and their defense gave up 4.9 yards per play to Indiana. And again, Indiana's offense this year has not been lights out. They averaged 4.9 against Cincinnati, which is the second highest that they've had. So the Cincinnati offense had sort of their the third best performance against Indiana. The Cincinnati defense had the third, Indiana had their second best game against Indiana defense. They went for 4.8 against Idaho. So basically the Cincinnati defense had the same amount of success against Indiana statistically as Idaho did. So I don't think that the Cincinnati defense has been necessarily lights out this year. I don't think they've played any good teams. Indiana, as Vince, you and I talked about when we watched that game play, Indiana should have blown Cincinnati out.
No question.
I mean, they
had every opportunity to.
Yes,
they had every opportunity to put their quote unquote their foot on the throat of Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's offense. And we'll talk more about them tomorrow. But Cincinnati's offense isn't, hugely explosive. They can score. Don't get me wrong, but if you get them in that big of a hole, it's going to be very tough for them to come back. And if any team really, you get down 24 points. I mean, that's tough to come back from. You're outside your game plan, right? This defense can be scored on. I do firmly believe that, but you do have to have some modicum amount of balance in order to keep this defense on their heels, and you also need to have some creative play calling. And I see people over in the chat calling for it. Of course, we're calling for it as well. Screens and working horizontal, and we've been calling for jets and things of that nature for a long time as well. I think this is the perfect game to implement a lot of that. I really, really do. But I don't know if they're going to. Maybe that's just not part of their offense, or maybe they're holding it back for that. I don't know what the deal is. I've seen them practice some of it, so I know that they've got it, but they just haven't, for whatever reason, utilized it in a game yet.
Right. I want to pull something up because some of these comments aren't making sense. RPO is killing the offensive line. If you think the RPO is killing the offensive line, I don't think you understand what an RPO is.
I completely agree.
The
with
RPO
that.
has nothing to do with the offensive line.
Nothing.
They're blocking like they would any other play. If a tight end is attached to the line of scrimmage, he's blocking like he would any other play. RPOs have nothing to do with the offensive line. The offensive line blocks a run play. It's as simple as that. So I don't have a clue what that comment means. Look, here's the other thing. I've seen people say that the offense only scored. I've seen this. The offense only scored 14 points against Wisconsin because the special teams had field goals are not credited to the special teams. You can't kick a field goal because of what you do on defense or you have to have an offensive drive unless you get a short field, which didn't happen. Notre Dame's field goals came from drives that the offense put together.
Correct.
The difference between that and a kick return is the offense has nothing to do with the kick return. The kick return does that. The punt returners do that.
Yeah, that's 100%.
Field goals are go to the offense.
Yes.
So if you're going to try to say the other thing, then you're looking to create you have an idea, an opinion that you're then trying to spin things into to back up that opinion. Okay. The offense has its problems. We can point out those problems without making faulty arguments that make it seem like the offense is worse than it is. So let's not get into that. Okay. And we're not going to continue doing that. But back to this point that we were talking about, Vince, so Cincinnati, or early in the game, Indiana took a 7-0 lead on Cincinnati.
It's a great drive.
Right.
I mean, it was a good drive.
Oh, yeah. Really good drive.
Yeah.
Punted the ball. Cincinnati punted. Indiana got it
3 and
back.
out. They were 3 and out on that drive. Yeah.
Indiana went down and drove it into the red zone, had it a 4th and goal or 4th down at like the 10-yard line. Instead of kicking a field goal, go up 10-0, they went for it on downs and didn't get it. Cincinnati goes 6 plays, 15 yards, punts it back to Indiana. Indiana gets the ball, good field position. They drive down, and they throw an interception in the end zone. At worst, it should have been 13-0. It was a horrible pass by Michael Penix. Threw it way behind the guy. If he just throws it away or makes a better throw, at worst, it's 13-0 because they should have kicked the field goal on when they were up 7-0. Then Cincinnati fumbles the ball, and Indiana gets deep in their territory, and they score a touchdown to make it 14-0.
Right.
Well, heck, that should have been 20-0 right there.
At the least.
You know, so I mean that was an opportunity where and then Cincinnati did a nice job of their next drive going down the field and getting a touchdown, making it 14-7, and then Indiana threw another pick and it was 14-10, and that's kind of how the game went. But they had every opportunity in the world, in my opinion, to just run Cincinnati off the field, and they missed those opportunities.
Right.
Notre Dame can't afford to do that. They have to get Cincinnati's defense on its heels early. That's going to be the key for me in this game, Vince, is can they do things pre-snap from a motion, formation, alignment, moving guys around standpoint? Can they do enough things where you have to be aggressive. You have to go after their aggressiveness with your own aggressiveness. That's going to be the key. If you're willing to do that, then they can go out and have success against Cincinnati this weekend with big plays. Because here's the one advantage that we've got to talk about for all the issues Notre Dame has had. They're a big play offense. What is Cincinnati's biggest vulnerability, Vince?
Big plays.
Big plays.
And we talked about that before the season even started with Marcus Freeman's defense. I mean, and it's still his defense. I don't care who's calling the shots. It's still his defense. And they're still going to be susceptible to the same stuff that they were when he was there. So big plays. That absolutely correct.
Right. So that's kind of that breakdown, Vince. That's where we see it. Let's go run game. Advantage. We go advantage Cincinnati on that.
Absolutely.
I think every team is going to get. I would probably give Navy's defense the advantage right now against Notre Dame's run game until they show me differently. Pass game to me is more of a wash.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's a wash. I think that Notre Dame has some opportunities there. It just comes down to the offensive line. Can they protect? Because the one thing we didn't talk about is that bottom number right down here. You know, this one right here.
20 seconds.
And that's why right now I have to give the edge right now to Cincinnati's defense over Notre Dame's offense, just because of what we see on paper. But if the game plan is sound, if the offensive line just plays mediocre football, this I do think Notre Dame should have the matchup advantage. They should. But we also can't give it. Yes, could and should.
Yeah.
But they don't right now based on what we've seen.
Yeah, I agree with that. And based on everything that we just said, that we just talked about, I mean, if you're giving Cincinnati the edge in the run game and you're making it a wash in the pass game, then you have to give Cincinnati the edge here. I mean, that's just common sense, right? And again, we're looking at paper. But again, I would not be overly surprised if we saw, you know, I have very similar feelings from a score standpoint that I had last week, right? I think Notre Dame could squeak out a win, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was by a couple scores. You know, at the end of the day, if the offense can come around and they can put some points on the board, I still have a lot of faith in Marcus Freeman's defense. And of course, we're going to talk about that tomorrow. But this side of the ball has to come to play. It's a home game. You got the winning streak on the line. You got your pride on the line. Frankly, you have your season on the line. Everything that they're trying to accomplish with their season is on the line tomorrow. You can't lose to a non-Power 5 team and expect to be able to compete for what you want to compete for. It just is what it is. As good as Cincinnati is, right? The knock is going to be you lost to a non-Power 5 team, and you shouldn't be, in the conversation. And this is going to determine what their season looks like.
This is not a game you should lose at home. I don't care how good Cincinnati is.
You can.
You shouldn't.
I agree.
And this is the side of the ball that's going to determine that. If they play their game, if they get back to kind of being that multiple moving around movement, use your speed to your advantage, because Cincinnati is a team built on speed on defense. They cannot match Notre Dame man for man in speed. You have to take advantage of that.
Correct.
And that's ultimately going to be the key. I do want to respond to this. In RPO, you need O-line with mobility, not chunky O-linemen. Again, false.
It's a run game.
Alabama ran RPOs all year last year, and all they have is chunky offensive linemen. So again, James, with all due respect, I don't think you understand what an RPO is. RPOs have nothing to do with the run plays you're calling. You can run any run concept you want. You can run power. You can do anything you want. RPO has nothing to do with that at all. Nothing. So with all due respect, I would encourage you to go back and watch the RPO video that we did this summer, because it explains what an RPO is. I don't know what your misunderstanding is, but you have, I think, a very fundamental misunderstanding of what an RPO is. RPOs to me in this game, however, I don't think are necessarily going to be the end-all be-all unless you're taking shots. That is the one thing I would like to see them maybe do, is take some RPO shots in this game, Vince, because they're such an aggressive defense with their coverages. A lot of that quick game stuff that you like to do on the RPOs isn't really going to be there. If you're going to take some shots, meaning ride it out and pull and throw a post behind it, that stuff could be there. They're going to play a lot of cover one, which is going to get you in some opportunities to drop back and take some shots. So I think those are things that we need to see. Big plays are going to be the key. Kyron Williams, Chris Tyree, Braden Lindsey, Kevin Austin, Avery Davis, Michael Mayer, plenty of big play weapons.
Yep.
It's going to be up to Tommy Rees and his staff to design ways to try to free him up. And this is going to be a big game for Tommy Rees, in my opinion. How does he adjust? How does he make changes to what they've done to adapt to what Cincinnati does, plus what his team is good at? You've got 4 games with this offense now. You know what Braden Lindsey can and can't do. You know what Kevin Austin can and can't do. Start building around their strengths. In his defense, he hasn't really called a lot of games with Braden Lindsey and Kevin Austin until now. But you got 4 games now to see, okay, maybe we need to try something a little different with Braden, right? Those are going to be the keys to the game. So that's going to be it for today's show. Vince, thanks for being with me today. Thanks for working through that fire drill with me. Luckily we knew in advance that it was coming, so it didn't happen right in the middle of the show. But look, this is the key to the game right here, folks. This is the matchup right here that's going to determine whether or not Notre Dame wins this game. I think it's a game Notre Dame can win convincingly, but if that's going to happen, it's going to be up to this side of the ball. Lions got to play at least solid, just be decent. Tommy Rees has to be on top of his game, and Jack Cohn or Drew Pine. If Jack Cohn's healthy, he's the guy. And if he's not, then Drew's the guy. But whoever it is, the quarterback's got to be poised. You've got to get the ball out to your playmakers, give them chances to make plays, and don't be afraid to take some shots. That ultimately is going to be the key to the game. But we'll get into some of that a little bit more as we get into our Thursday prediction. We'll dive into the more specific keys of what they need to do. So for Vince, I'm Brian. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow at 12:30. It'll just be me. Vince will not be around tomorrow for the show. He's got a school assignment he has to do. Yes. But we will still be back here 12:30 tomorrow to break down the Notre Dame defense against the Cincinnati offense. Thursday, 12:30 as well. We will be back on Thursday to give our game predictions and kind of go to the keys of the game, key matchups, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, Friday, it's mailbag time. So thanks for being with us. For Vince, Brian, you all have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you again very, very soon.